Etched into the desert floor of Peru, colossal figures and lines form a puzzle 2,000 years old. These are the Nazca Lines, a sprawling gallery of ancient art, so vast it can only be seen from the sky. Who built these mysterious geoglyphs, and what powerful purpose did they serve in such a barren landscape? You are about to journey into one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries, where we will separate compelling evidence from wild speculation. We will explore theories of celestial calendars, forgotten rituals, and even visitors from other worlds. By the end, you will have the full story behind these desert giants and the people who made them. Were they messages to the gods, a massive map of the stars, or something even stranger? What does it truly mean to leave a mark that lasts for millennia? The true scale of this desert canvas remained hidden for centuries, seen only in fragments by those on the ground. It was the dawn of modern aviation that finally pulled back the curtain. In the 1920s, as commercial and military flights began crossing the Peruvian skies, pilots reported something unbelievable. They looked down upon a landscape etched with enormous shapes, a sprawling art gallery invisible from the very earth it was drawn upon. These initial aerial sightings sparked the first real investigations. A Peruvian archaeologist named Toribio Mejia Zesp is credited with the first formal, ground-level study of the lines in 1926, though his perspective was limited to what he could see from nearby foothills. The real breakthrough came 2 decades later with an American historian named Paul Kosok. Flying over the desert, he witnessed the lines in their full, breathtaking glory during the sunset of June 22, 1941. He saw one of the long, straight lines pointing directly toward the setting sun, and in a moment of inspiration, he called the Nazca Plateau the biggest astronomy book in the world. This idea that the lines were a giant celestial calendar would become a cornerstone of early research. But it was the person Kosok brought on to assist him who would become the line's most famous champion. Her name was Maria Reiche, a German mathematician who would dedicate the rest of her life to solving this puzzle. Armed with little more than a ladder, a broom, and unwavering determination, Maria Reiche became the guardian of the Nazca Lines. For over 50 years, she lived in a small house near the desert, meticulously mapping, measuring, and clearing the stones to preserve the figures. She fought tirelessly against vandalism, government neglect, and even the tracks of passing vehicles, often funding her preservation efforts with her own modest income. Through her work, she documented hundreds of the geoglyphs, cementing the theory that many aligned with solar, lunar, and stellar events. Her solitary crusade transformed our understanding, raising a profound question. What drove an ancient culture to create art they themselves could never fully see? And what does that tell us about the power of human belief this vast, open-air gallery exists in one of the driest places on Earth? The Nazca Lines are spread across the Pampas de Jumana, a high, windswept plateau nestled between the towns of Nazca and Palpa in southern Peru. The geography here is a perfect natural canvas. The desert floor is not just sand, it is a layer of dark, rust-colored pebbles coated with a patina called desert varnish. For centuries, wind and minerals have stained these stones a deep, reddish brown. The ancient artists created their designs with breathtaking simplicity. They did not build up, they revealed. By carefully removing these dark surface stones, they exposed the contrasting, much lighter-colored soil hidden just beneath. This single, brilliant technique created lines that stand out with stark clarity against the dark plain. The scale of their work is almost beyond comprehension. These geoglyphs are not confined to a small area. They sprawl across nearly 1,000 square kilometers of this arid plateau. That is a space so large you could fit a modern metropolis within its bounds. This immense, rainless environment became the line's greatest protector. With less than 1 inch of rainfall per year, there is little erosion. The winds that sweep across the plain are gentle and predictable, scouring the surface without blurring the carefully made designs. It is this unique combination of a stable climate and a perfect geological canvas that has preserved these fragile drawings, allowing them to survive for more than 2,000 years completely exposed to the elements. How did a society without advanced technology plan and execute such precise, monumental artwork across this formidable landscape? The sheer number of these markings is staggering, with hundreds of geometric forms dominating the landscape. These are not the famous animal figures, but the foundational grammar of the entire desert canvas. Countless straight lines, some running perfectly straight for over 30 miles, cut across the plains. Alongside them are enormous trapezoids that widen like giant runways, vast triangles that pierce the horizon, and complex spirals that seem to swirl with hidden energy. Their construction reveals an almost supernatural precision. How did the Nazca achieve such perfect linearity over such impossible distances without modern tools? The answer lies in simple, brilliant technology. They likely used a series of stakes and ropes to plot out these immense shapes. By aligning sight lines between multiple stakes, they could extend a perfectly straight path for miles, clearing the dark stones from their chosen path to reveal the bright earth beneath. But what was the purpose of these colossal geometric forms? One enduring theory suggests they functioned as a massive astronomical calendar. Certain lines have been found to point directly toward the sun during the solstices, and others may align with important stars or constellations, marking key dates for planting or harvest in a land where timing was everything. Another idea proposes they were ceremonial pathways, walked by priests or pilgrims during sacred rituals. These long, straight lines and wide trapezoids could have served as processional routes, leading people toward ceremonial centers or natural landmarks on the horizon. Perhaps the most compelling theory connects these lines directly to the most precious resource in the desert, water. The Nazca were masters of hydrology, building sophisticated underground aqueducts to tap into subterranean water sources. Some researchers have noticed that many of the widest trapezoids and longest lines point directly toward sources of water in the distant foothills. They may have been a vast physical map of the underground water system, or perhaps they were used in rituals intended to call upon the mountain deities to provide life-giving water. These geometric shapes, then, were far more than simple art. They were a complex language of survival, faith, and cosmic observation etched into the very bones of the earth. Yet these geometric lines are only half the story. Scattered across the same vast desert canvas are the true superstars of the Nazca Plateau, the enormous biomorphic figures that capture the imagination like nothing else. These are not abstract shapes, but stunningly detailed depictions of animals and beings, scaled to a size that defies belief. The hummingbird, with its long, slender beak and perfectly rendered wings, stretches over 300 feet. The spider, with one leg extended in an unnaturally long line, is equally massive, its body and legs drawn with an anatomical precision that seems impossible for its scale. Then there is the monkey, a complex and playful figure depicted with a spiraling tail, its entire form measuring more than 300 feet from head to toe. And the condor, a majestic bird with its wings spread wide, embodies the power of the Andean skies. To create such proportionate and graceful figures, the Nazca artists must have worked from smaller scale models, scaling them up with an incredible eye for perspective. They were master geometers, transforming a barren plateau into a gallery of giants. But why these specific creatures? Each one was deeply woven into the fabric of Nazca life and belief. The hummingbird, a vital pollinator, was likely a symbol of fertility and the renewal of life. The spider, in many Andean traditions, was seen as a controller of rain and a bringer of water, a crucial connection in this arid land. The monkey, an animal not native to this desert but to the lush Amazon forests far to the east, may have represented a connection to a mythical, water-rich homeland or to celestial bodies. The condor, soaring higher than any other bird, was a clear messenger to the gods, a bridge between the earth and the heavens. these colossal figures were far more than simple artwork. They were a sacred language etched into the land to communicate with powerful forces. They were prayers for water, symbols of celestial cycles, and pleas for fertility, all rendered on a scale meant for the eyes of the gods alone. Among these animal figures, however, stand forms that are far more enigmatic. High on a hillside, visible to those on the ground below, is one of the most famous and peculiar geoglyphs of all. It is known as the astronaut, a figure with a large, bulbous head that resembles a helmet and one hand raised as if in greeting. Nearby, another humanoid form called the man with a hat presents a similar mystery. Their strange appearance has, for decades, fueled speculation about ancient contact with extraterrestrial beings. Yet a closer look reveals a much more earthly explanation. The large head of the astronaut is far more likely to represent the ornate headdress of a powerful shaman, or perhaps a stylized depiction of a deity. In ancient Andean art, figures with exaggerated, often animal-like features commonly symbolize a spiritual leader in a transformed, trance-like state. The raised hand is not a wave to a spaceship, but a ritual gesture, a blessing or a call to the spirit world. Their location is the crucial clue that debunks the alien theory. Unlike the massive animal figures on the flat plains below, these humanoid forms are etched onto steep hillsides. They were positioned specifically to be seen by people standing in the valley. This was not art for the gods alone, it was a message for the community. These figures likely served as protective guardians, watching over the sacred pathways and water sources from their elevated perches, or as focal points for ceremonies conducted on the slopes beneath them. They remind us that the Nazca world was one of profound spiritual belief, where the line between human, animal, and God was beautifully and intentionally blurred. The true genius of the Nazca lies not just in their vision, but in their method. Creating such precise, monumental art required a system both elegantly simple and brilliantly effective. The entire process began with the canvas itself. The desert floor is covered in a layer of dark, reddish stones coated with a natural varnish of iron oxide. To make their marks, the Nazca artists did not add anything, they simply took away. By carefully removing these dark surface stones, they exposed the bright, creamy-colored sand that had been hidden beneath for centuries. This single act of subtraction created a stunning visual contrast, a line or shape that would stand out sharply against the darker plane for millennia. Scaling a small sketch into a geoglyph over 300 feet long, however, is the real puzzle. How do you ensure a hummingbird's curved wing remains perfectly proportioned, or that a monkey's spiraling tail does not distort when blown up to such an impossible size? The answer likely involved masterful geometry and basic tools. Archaeologists believe the Nazca began with small-scale models, designs etched onto the ground or perhaps drawn on materials that have long since decayed. To transfer these designs, they probably used a system of stakes and ropes. They could have established a central axis line, then used a series of stakes placed at key points to mark the curves and angles of the figure. By clearing the stones from the paths between these stakes, they scaled up their model with remarkable accuracy, a process not so different from connecting the dots on a colossal scale. For the vast geometric forms, the long straight lines and enormous trapezoids, the technique was similar but even more ambitious. To achieve near-perfect linearity over many miles, teams of workers would have set a series of sighting poles in a straight line across the desert. By aligning their view from the first pole to the last, they could guide the clearing of stones to form a path that remained perfectly straight across the undulating terrain, a testament to their understanding of basic surveying. This was not the work of a lone artist. The construction of the Nazca Lines was a monumental communal project, demanding incredible organizational skill and social cohesion. It required planners to design the geoglyphs, overseers to direct the work, and large teams of people to patiently clear the stones, basket by basket. This collective effort, repeated across generations, transformed the entire plateau. The lines are more than art, they are the physical evidence of a society united by a shared purpose, a people who together moved mountains of pebbles to leave a message for the ages. Behind these monumental designs stood a civilization uniquely adapted to one of the planet's most challenging environments. The Nazca culture flourished in southern Peru for nearly 900 years, from around 100 years before the Common Era to 800 years into the Common Era. This was not a fleeting empire but a resilient society that carved out a life in an unforgiving desert. Their world was defined by a profound relationship with water, or the lack of it. They were master hydraulic engineers, constructing a sophisticated network of underground aqueducts known as puquios to tap into subterranean aquifers. These remarkable feats of engineering, some of which are still in use today, allowed them to channel water from mountain sources to their settlements and farmland, transforming barren soil into fertile valleys. This intimate, daily struggle for water shaped their entire worldview, making the elements of sky and earth not just parts of nature but powerful, living deities. Their belief system centered on the worship of mountain gods and water spirits. They saw the distant, snow-capped Andes not just as a physical barrier, but as the source of all life, the sacred origin of the water that sustained them. The condor, a frequent figure in their art and on the desert floor, was revered as a messenger that could carry their prayers to these mountain deities. This deep spiritual connection to their environment provides the most compelling explanation for why they would undertake such a monumental project as the lines. The geoglyphs were likely a grand, physical expression of their faith. The long, straight lines and trapezoids may have been sacred pathways for ceremonial processions, walked by priests and pilgrims during rituals designed to honor the gods of water and mountain. The animal figures, like the spider believed to control rain or the hummingbird symbolizing fertility, were massive prayers etched into the land itself, desperate and hopeful communications with the forces that controlled their survival. This spiritual motivation is echoed in the artifacts they left behind. The Nazca were extraordinary artisans, renowned for their intricate polychrome pottery and brilliantly woven textiles. Their ceramics often depicted the very same animals found on the plateau, rendered with a vibrant energy and a complex symbolic language. These were not mere decorations, they were vessels of meaning, illustrating a cosmology where the natural and supernatural worlds were inextricably linked. The creation of the lines, then, was the ultimate expression of this culture, a society using the greatest canvas they had, the earth itself, to communicate with the gods who held the key to their existence in the palm of their hand. Her work began almost by chance, a temporary assignment that would become a lifelong calling. Maria Reiche first arrived in Peru in the 1930s as a tutor for the children of the German consul. It was her collaboration with the American historian Paul Kossock in the early 1940s that changed everything. After seeing the lines from the air, she was captivated, dedicating the next 5 decades of her life to their study and preservation. Armed with nothing more than a ladder, a compass, and a simple broom, she became a solitary figure on the vast pampas de Jumana. She would spend days and weeks at a time in the desert, meticulously mapping the geoglyphs and carefully sweeping the dark stones to keep the designs clear and visible. She funded this immense project largely from her own modest savings, often living in near poverty, driven by a conviction that these lines held a profound, ancient secret. Her central theory, building on Kossock's initial insight, was that the Nazca Lines formed a massive astronomical calendar. She believed the long lines and geometric shapes pointed to key positions of the sun, moon, and stars on the horizon, marking solstices, equinoxes, and cycles vital to agriculture. Her book, The Mystery on the Desert, detailed these ideas and brought international attention to the fragile site, but her scientific work was matched by an even greater passion: protection. She witnessed the lines being damaged by off-road vehicles and careless visitors, and she launched a one-woman crusade against this destruction. She tirelessly lobbied the Peruvian government, hired guards, and even personally confronted those who threatened the geoglyphs. Her relentless advocacy was ultimately successful, leading to the Nazca Lines being declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994. This official recognition ensured legal protection and conservation funds, securing the line's future. Maria Reiche went blind in her later years, but she had already memorized every curve and line of her beloved desert canvas. She died in Peru in 1998 and was buried with full state honors near the site she had devoted her life to understanding. Her legacy is not just in her theories, but in the very existence of the lines we see today. She was the guardian who stood between an ancient mystery and modern oblivion, a single person whose obsession saved a world treasure for us all. Maria Reiche saw the desert not as a barren plain, but as a sprawling celestial map. Her decades of meticulous work led her to a compelling conclusion. She believed the long, straight lines and geometric shapes were not random, but deliberate markers for cosmic events. According to her hypothesis, certain lines pointed directly to the spot on the horizon where the sun would rise or set on the June and December solstices. Others, she argued, aligned with the heliacal rising of important stars or constellations, the moment they first become visible in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility. For an agricultural society living on the edge of survival, this would have been a calendar of immense practical power. Knowing the precise timing of the solstices would have been crucial for planning the planting and harvesting of crops in a region where a mistake of just a few weeks could mean famine. The giant spider, in her view, might have been a representation of the constellation Orion, a celestial marker for the coming rains. This theory transformed the lines from mysterious art into a functional, even brilliant tool for survival, a testament to the Nazca's sophisticated understanding of the heavens. Yet modern archaeologists have cast significant doubt on this elegant idea. While some lines do indeed align with solstice points, critics point out that with hundreds of lines crisscrossing the desert, some are bound to point to astronomically significant positions purely by chance. The alignments are often not precise enough to function as a reliable calendar for a society that depended on accurate timing. A line that is even 1 degree off would, over a short period, result in a miscalculation of several days, rendering it useless for precise agricultural planning. Furthermore, many of the most famous animal figures do not show any clear astronomical orientation at all. If the primary purpose was a calendar, why create such complex biomorphs that seem to serve no timekeeping function? This criticism does not entirely dismiss the astronomical connection, but it suggests it was likely just one part of a much richer, more complex spiritual and ceremonial purpose. The lines may have connected the people to the cosmos, but perhaps not as a simple farmer's almanac. They might have been a physical expression of a world view where the earth and the sky were mirrors of each other, where walking a line pointing to the solstice sun was a way of walking with the gods themselves. This theory transforms the desert from an observatory into a cathedral. The most compelling modern explanation connects the lines directly to the lifeblood of the Nazca world, water. In a landscape that receives almost no rain, survival depended not on the sky above, but on the water flowing unseen beneath their feet. The Nazca were hydrological geniuses, masters of tapping into subterranean aquifers with their complex puquios systems. Their entire worldview was saturated with a reverence for the mountain gods, or apus, who were believed to control the flow of this precious resource from the distant Andes. The geoglyphs were likely a physical prayer, a massive ritual landscape designed to communicate with these powerful deities. The wide, trapezoidal shapes, which from the air resemble giant runways, make perfect sense in this context. On the ground, these vast clearings would have functioned as ceremonial plazas. Imagine hundreds of people gathered within these enormous trapezoids, conducting rituals, making offerings, and chanting prayers to the mountain Apus, begging them to replenish the underground streams that fed their aqueducts. The long, straight lines radiating from these plazas may have served as sacred pathways, guiding processions toward specific mountains or water sources on the horizon. This was not a passive hope for rain. It was an active, communal effort to influence the very forces of nature. The correlation between the lines and water is not just symbolic, it is startlingly literal. Researchers have mapped the directions of many long lines and trapezoids and found they frequently point directly toward sources of water in the foothills. Other lines trace the paths of subsurface aquifers, creating a giant physical map of the invisible water network that sustained their civilization. A line pointing toward a distant mountain peak was not just an alignment, it was a direct plea to the Apu residing there. A trapezoid built over a known aquifer was a powerful act of consecration, marking that spot as a sacred conduit between the human and the divine. The animal figures deepen this connection. The spider, a creature associated with rain and water in Andean myth, becomes a colossal invocation for moisture. The hummingbird, a pollinator linked to fertility and blossoming life, is a prayer for the desert to bloom. Every glyph was part of a grand, desperate conversation with the world, a language of survival written large enough for the gods to see. Walk the length of a perfectly straight line for miles, and your journey becomes a meditation. This is the core of the ritual pathway theory, which sees the Nazca Desert not as a picture book for the gods, but as a living, breathing, sacred landscape. These immense lines and trapezoids were not meant to be seen from above as we see them today. They were meant to be walked. Imagine a ceremonial procession, a line of priests and pilgrims moving slowly and deliberately along the stark white path cleared of dark stones. With each step, they would be physically tracing a connection to a distant mountain, a specific star, or a source of water. The very act of walking this long, straight route was a form of prayer, a kinetic ritual that integrated the community with the powerful forces of the cosmos. The purpose of these pilgrimages was deeply tied to the cycles of life and death that governed their world. Fertility rites would have been paramount, ceremonies pleading for the land to be productive and for the people to prosper. The lines may also have been pathways for ancestor worship, guiding spirits of the deceased toward the afterlife or connecting the living to the realm of their forebears. This theory is powerfully supported by physical evidence found on the ground. Archaeologists have discovered small, purposeful piles of stones and the remains of simple ceremonial platforms, known as adabitos, at the endpoints of many lines and at the vertices of the large trapezoids. These were not grand temples, but intimate altars. On these platforms, they would have left offerings, perhaps shells from the distant ocean, precious spondylus shells, fragments of beautifully painted pottery, or food for the gods. The discovery of broken pottery shards scattered at these sites is particularly telling. These were likely vessels used in ceremonies, deliberately smashed as part of the ritual, a permanent offering left at the journey's end. The entire system, from the starting point to the long walk to the final altar, formed a complete ritual circuit. It was a landscape engineered for spiritual experience, where every footstep on the bright, exposed earth was a verse in a long, silent hymn to the powers that sustained them. This idea of the lines as landing strips for ancient astronauts was launched into the public imagination by a Swiss author named Erich von Däniken. His 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods, became an international sensation. Von Däniken looked at the Nazca Lines and saw something that, to him, defied any earthly explanation. He argued that the long, straight lines and wide trapezoids were perfect runways for alien spacecraft. The intricate animal figures, he suggested, were signals or messages intended for these extraterrestrial visitors, created by primitive humans under the guidance of their advanced alien teachers. It was a thrilling, cosmic narrative that captured the spirit of the space age, offering a simple and dramatic answer to a complex archaeological puzzle. The appeal is understandable. It transforms a mystery into a science fiction spectacle. Yet, when examined against the weight of archaeological evidence, this theory completely unravels. The most obvious flaw is the very idea of the lines as runways. The desert floor is not a smooth, hardened tarmac. It is a soft, sandy surface covered in loose pebbles. Any aircraft attempting to land on it, ancient or modern, would simply sink or be torn apart. Furthermore, many of the so-called runways are not even flat. They run across hills and dips in the terrain, making them entirely impractical for any kind of vehicle. More importantly, von Däniken's hypothesis requires us to believe that the Nazca people were incapable of such achievements on their own. This ignores everything we now know about their sophisticated culture. We have the physical evidence of their brilliant hydrology, their intricate pottery, and their complex social organization. The construction of the lines, while monumental, required no alien technology, only simple tools, coordinated labor, and a powerful shared purpose. The theory also conveniently dismisses the profound cultural and spiritual context that so clearly explains the lines' meanings, from their connections to water sources to their function as ritual pathways. Scholars universally reject the ancient astronaut idea, not because they are closed-minded, but because it is an unnecessary complication. It ignores the real and far more fascinating story of human ingenuity and spiritual belief etched into that desert floor. The true wonder of the Nazca Lines is not that they were made for aliens, but that they were made by people, a testament to what humanity can achieve when driven by faith and a desperate need to connect with the forces that govern their world. But if the lines were meant to be walked and not seen from above, why create such perfectly proportioned figures that only make sense from a great height? This paradox led to one of the most creative attempts to solve the Nazca mystery. The balloon theory proposes a breathtaking idea that the Nazca people themselves soared over the desert in hot air balloons, supervising the construction of their giant artworks from the sky. In the 1970s, two explorers, Jim Woodman and Julian Knott, became obsessed with this possibility. They studied Nazca artifacts, including remarkably preserved textiles, and noted that the culture had access to all the necessary materials. They could have woven a large balloon envelope from the same cotton used for their famous cloth, and they could have produced heat for lift by building a fire in a pottery-fired basket. To prove it was possible, Woodman and Knott decided to build their own balloon using only technology the Nazca would have possessed. They named their vessel the Condor 1. In November 1975, with Julian Knott as pilot, the Condor 1 lifted off from the Nazca Desert. The balloon, fueled by a simple fire, climbed to a height of nearly 600 feet and traveled for almost 20 minutes before landing safely. The flight was a dramatic success, demonstrating that the basic principles of hot air ballooning were indeed within the grasp of this ancient culture. It was a powerful, romantic vision, one that solved the viewing problem elegantly, placing the artists themselves in the sky to admire their work. Yet for all its appeal, the balloon theory lacks any solid archaeological evidence. No remnants of a Nazca-era balloon have ever been found in the dry desert, which has preserved far more fragile items like textiles and baskets. No depictions of balloons or flight exist in their intricate pottery or art. While the Condor 1 flight proved it was possible, it did not prove it actually happened. The theory remains an ingenious but unproven footnote, a beautiful solution to a problem that the Nazca may not have even recognized. Perhaps they never needed to see the full picture, trusting that their gods in the sky had the perfect view all along. Sound itself becomes a tool of creation in some of the most extraordinary theories. Beyond balloons, some have proposed the Nazca possessed a lost technology based on sonic levitation. The idea suggests that priests or engineers used specific sound frequencies, perhaps from drums or chanting, to vibrate the desert stones, causing them to levitate or move effortlessly into place. This would explain the movement of stones for the lines and the apparent precision of the figures as a form of acoustic engineering, a forgotten science of vibration. It is a captivating thought, envisioning the desert air humming with resonant power, making the impossible seem simple. Yet for all its imaginative appeal, this theory floats on a foundation of pure speculation. Archaeologists have found zero evidence for any such technology at Nazca. No ancient tuning forks, no specialized acoustic chambers, no depictions of sound-based construction in their vast artistic record. The stones used in the lines are not massive blocks like those at Stonehenge. They are small, hand-sized pebbles. Moving them required no supernatural force, only the determined work of many hands carrying baskets. The simple, proven techniques of stakes, ropes, and organized labor are more than sufficient to explain every single geoglyph. These fringe ideas often arise from a modern bias, a reluctance to believe that ancient people with simple tools could achieve such grand works. We project our own technological worldview onto the past, assuming they needed advanced machinery when what they truly possessed was advanced social organization and an unshakable shared purpose. The real magic of Nazca was not in lost sonic devices, but in the collective will of a people who moved mountains of pebbles, one basket at a time, for their gods. Long before the Nazca people left their mark, a different culture was already etching messages into the hills. Just north of the Nazca Plateau, in the region of Palpa, lies an older and equally mysterious collection of geoglyphs. These are the Palpa lines created by the Paracas culture, a civilization that flourished from around 800 to 100 years before the Common Era. While the Nazca designs sprawl across flat plains, the Paracas geoglyphs are most often found on the steep slopes of hills, making them visible to the entire community below. This shift in location signals a profound difference in purpose and perspective. The Paracas figures are overwhelmingly humanoid. They depict stylized warriors, deities, and ancestral figures, some with elaborate headdresses and radiating patterns that look almost like halos. Their style is distinct, more focused on human forms and less on the precise geometry and animal biomorphs that would later define the Nazca period. The famous Nazca hummingbird and spider have no real counterparts here. Instead, we see a gallery of giants gazing down from the hillsides, their presence a constant reminder of the ancestors and gods watching over the living. This stylistic evolution tells a clear story. The tradition of making geoglyphs did not appear out of nowhere with the Nazca. It began centuries earlier with the Paracas, who used the hills as their canvas for communal and likely ancestral veneration. Over time, the focus seems to have shifted. The Paracas hillside figures, meant to be seen by people, gradually gave way to the Nazca Plains figures, which were designed on a scale meant for a higher, perhaps divine, audience. This continuity is crucial. It proves that the Nazca lines were not an isolated, inexplicable phenomenon. They were the culmination of a centuries-long cultural tradition, a ritual practice that evolved and changed with the people who practiced it. The desert was not marked in a single generation, but over many, as each culture sought its own way to speak to the powers that shaped their world. For centuries, the true scale of the Nazca canvas remained just beyond our grasp. Now, the view from above has been transformed by a technological revolution. Drones and high-resolution satellites are acting as our new eyes in the sky, scanning every inch of the desert with a precision that early aerial photographers could only dream of. These tools are not just confirming what we already knew, they are revealing a hidden world. In just the past few years, researchers from Yamagata University in Japan have made a series of stunning announcements. Using a combination of on-the-ground fieldwork and advanced AI analysis of massive sets of aerial imagery, they have identified hundreds of previously unknown geoglyphs. We are not talking about a few more lines, but a vast hidden layer of art that had faded into the landscape, invisible to the naked eye even from a plane. This changes everything we thought about the scope of this ancient project. The newly discovered figures are generally smaller, often between 15 and 100 feet across, and they are different. Alongside the familiar animal forms, we are now seeing a fascinating array of human-like figures. Some depict stylized warriors holding clubs or staffs. Others show what appear to be people with exaggerated, almost cartoonish heads, their expressions frozen in time. Many of these humanoid geoglyphs are situated on ancient pathways leading to ceremonial centers, suggesting they may have served as territorial markers or protective spirits for pilgrims traveling to ritual sites. This influx of human forms fundamentally shifts the narrative away from a landscape populated solely by animal spirits. It paints a picture of a society that was also deeply concerned with representing itself, its warriors, its leaders, and perhaps its ancestors on this grand communal canvas. The AI is not just finding more of the same, it is revealing a greater complexity in the entire system. The computer algorithms are trained to recognize the subtle discoloration and minute changes in topography that signal a buried geoglyph, patterns too faint for any human to consistently detect across 1,000 square kilometers. This has led to the discovery of complex scenes where multiple figures interact or are connected by lines, suggesting narratives we are only beginning to decipher. The sheer volume of new data reveals that the creation of these lines was not a single, unified project, but a tradition that evolved over many centuries, with different styles and purposes emerging and fading across generations. Each new geoglyph discovered by a drone's camera is another piece of a sprawling, prehistoric puzzle. We are no longer just studying the famous spider or the monkey. We are mapping an entire ritual landscape of unimaginable richness, a sacred geography that is far more extensive and intricate than Maria Reiche ever could have known. These technologies are doing more than just adding to the map. They are forcing us to redraw it completely, revealing a civilization that communicated with their gods on a scale we are only now beginning to comprehend. These fragile lines have survived for 2,000 years, but their greatest challenges are happening right now. The same dry climate that preserved them is now turning against them. Unusual, heavy rains linked to climate change are causing sudden, destructive erosion, washing away the carefully arranged stones in muddy gullies. Powerful desert winds, intensified by shifting weather patterns, are also scouring the surface with new force. Yet the more immediate danger often comes from people. Illegal gold mining operations have encroached dangerously close to the protected zone. Heavy trucks and machinery carve their own destructive tracks through the desert, obliterating ancient lines in moments and polluting the environment with mercury and lead. Then there was the stunning incident in December of 2014. The environmental group Greenpeace staged a protest directly on the Nazca Plateau. Activists laid down huge, bright yellow fabric letters reading "Time for Change" right beside the famous hummingbird figure. In their wake, they left permanent foot damage in the fragile desert crust, a scar of good intentions that crossed a sacred line. The Peruvian government was furious, calling it an unacceptable attack on a national treasure and demanding accountability. This event highlighted a painful truth that even well-meaning human contact can be catastrophically destructive. In response, a multi-layered defense of the site is now underway. The Peruvian Ministry of Culture has implemented strict, controlled access. Visitors are no longer allowed to simply walk across the plain. Instead, they must view the lines from designated metal observation towers or take carefully regulated flights that follow specific paths to minimize environmental impact. On the ground, a network of surveillance cameras and regular patrols by police and site guardians watches for miners and vandals. The goal is to make the desert a fortress without walls. International cooperation is also vital. UNESCO provides constant monitoring and expertise, while research teams from around the world use non-invasive technologies like drones to map the line's condition without ever touching them. Perhaps the most crucial battle is being fought through public education. authorities are working with local communities to foster a sense of shared ownership and pride. They teach that the lines are not just a tourist attraction, but the sacred legacy of their own ancestors, a cultural heart that pumps identity and history into the present. The survival of these ancient messages depends on this delicate balance, a constant vigil against the elements and ourselves, protecting a whisper from the past in an increasingly noisy world. That official recognition in 1994 was a turning point in the long fight to protect the lines. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO, granted the Nazca and Palpa geoglyphs the prestigious status of a World Heritage Site. This was not merely an honorary title, it was a powerful shield. To earn this designation, a site must demonstrate outstanding universal value, meaning its cultural significance transcends national borders and speaks to all of humanity. The Nazca Lines met this high bar on two critical counts. First, they were recognized as a unique artistic achievement of humankind. The committee saw the immense scale and mastery of the geoglyphs as a testament to human creativity, a gallery without equal anywhere in the world. Second, they serve as an extraordinary testimony to a vanished culture. The lines offer a direct, if enigmatic, connection to the beliefs, rituals, and daily struggles of the Nazca people, a civilization that left no written records. This official status fundamentally changed the game for conservation. It provides a robust legal framework, compelling the Peruvian government to enforce strict protections and manage the site according to international standards. It unlocks access to global funding pools and expert resources for preservation projects that local authorities could never afford alone. Perhaps most importantly, it places the lines on the world stage, transforming them from a Peruvian national treasure into a legacy for all people. This global spotlight brings constant international attention, which itself acts as a deterrent against neglect and destruction. The world is now watching, and that collective gaze is one of the most powerful tools ensuring these ancient messages are not erased by time or carelessness. That ancient impulse to transform the landscape echoes powerfully in our own time. The mysterious beauty of the Nazca Lines has transcended archaeology, becoming a profound source of inspiration for modern artists and creators. When these vast geoglyphs burst into the global consciousness in the mid-20th century, they offered a radical new vision of what art could be, one that was monumental, integrated with the earth, and almost mythic in its scale. This influence is felt most directly in the land art movement of the 1960s and 70s. Artists like Robert Smithson, who created the iconic spiral jetty in Utah's Great Salt Lake, were deeply inspired by the Nazca precedent. They saw in those desert lines a way to break art free from the confines of museums and galleries to create works that were part of the planet itself. The Nazca Lines demonstrated that a piece of art could be a mile long, that it could use the natural terrain as its medium, and that its full impact could only be grasped from a perspective that made the human feel small. This aesthetic of giant, earth-based forms rippled out into popular culture, appearing in the dramatic opening sequences of science fiction films, where vast alien geometries are revealed from the air. It influenced graphic designers who borrowed the clean, stark lines and biomorphic shapes for everything from corporate logos to album covers, evoking a sense of ancient mystery and timeless elegance. Writers, too, have woven the lines into their narratives, using them as settings for tales of cosmic contact or as metaphors for humanity's eternal struggle to leave a mark. The enduring power of these geoglyphs lies in this very quality. They are a perfect blank canvas for the modern imagination. We look at them and see not just ancient prayers for water, but a mirror reflecting our own desires, our own questions about our place in the universe, and our own yearning to create something that will outlast us. The lines are a conversation between past and present, a silent call across 2,000 years that continues to shape how we see art, the land, and ourselves. The desire to carve messages into the earth is a human impulse found across the globe. Far from the Peruvian desert, the rolling green hills of Oxfordshire, England, hold their own ancient secret. The Uffington white horse is a stylized equine figure etched into the chalky hillside over 3,000 years ago. Unlike the hidden Nazca figures, this horse was meant to be seen, a proud community emblem visible for miles across the countryside. Its creators used a similar technique of cutting away the turf to reveal the bright white chalk beneath, but its purpose was likely more territorial or tribal, a symbol of identity for the people living in its shadow. Travel to the Atacama Desert in Chile, and you will find the largest figurative geoglyph in the world. The Atacama Giant is a massive humanoid figure standing over 300 feet tall, surrounded by lines and a collection of other geoglyphs. Created by the Tiwanaku and Inca cultures between 1000 and 1400 years ago, these figures are also hillside drawings clearly designed for human viewers. They are thought to be astronomical calendars and guides for llama caravans traversing the trade routes below, a very practical form of desert wayfinding. More recently, laser-based scanning technology has revealed a stunning secret hidden beneath the Amazon rainforest canopy. Hundreds of geometric geoglyphs, enormous circles, squares, and octagons, were carved into the land over 2,000 years ago. Unlike the arid plains of Nazca, these Brazilian earthworks were created in a lush, challenging environment. Their purpose remains debated, but they were likely ceremonial enclosures for seasonal gatherings, not meant to be seen from above but experienced from within. So what sets the Nazca Lines apart in this global family of giant art? It is a combination of scale, visibility, and intent. The Nazca geoglyphs are not a single figure on a hill. They are a complex, interconnected system covering nearly 400 square miles. While the Uffington horse and the Atacama Giant were proclamations to the human world, the Nazca Lines were whispers to the divine. Their creators deliberately placed their most elaborate works on a flat plain where they were invisible from the ground, a conscious choice to make art not for themselves but for the gods in the sky. This divine audience, coupled with their sheer number and breathtaking precision, elevates the Nazca mystery to a class all its own, a testament to a faith so powerful it could move mountains of stone to speak to the heavens. Even with all we have learned, the desert still guards its deepest secrets. One of the most fascinating puzzles is the phenomenon of palimpsests, where one design was deliberately drawn over an older one. The figure known as the killer whale provides a stunning example. High-resolution scans have revealed that this massive marine predator was superimposed on top of a previous, different geoglyph. Why would a culture that invested so much labor in these creations choose to erase and rewrite its own sacred canvas? It suggests the lines were not permanent monuments in the way we think of them, but a living, changing text. Perhaps a new ruler or priestly faction came to power, seeking to impose a new spiritual narrative onto the landscape. Or maybe the original figure was linked to a deity or clan that had fallen out of favor, its power symbolically replaced by the more potent image of the killer whale, a creature of immense strength from the distant ocean. This act of rewriting proves that the meaning of the lines was fluid, evolving with the society that maintained them. The exact nature of the ceremonies performed here also remains just beyond our grasp. We can theorize about processions and offerings, but the specific chants, the precise rituals, the exact moments when the gods were believed to listen, are lost to time. Were these ceremonies joyful celebrations of the rainy season, or desperate, fearful pleas during a prolonged drought? Did only a select group of priests walk the lines, or were entire communities involved? The physical evidence of broken pottery and ceremonial platforms points to activity, but the sounds and the spirits of those gatherings have faded into silence. Then there is the ultimate question: why did this centuries-long tradition suddenly end? Around 500 years after the Common Era, the creation of new geoglyphs seems to have ceased. This was not an isolated event, but part of a larger collapse. The Nazca society was likely stressed by a perfect storm of calamities. Geological evidence points to a series of catastrophic floods, followed by a prolonged, devastating drought, both possibly linked to a dramatic El Niño weather pattern. These climatic shifts would have shattered their sophisticated water management systems and made the desert truly uninhabitable. At the same time, a powerful new culture was expanding from the highlands, the Wari Empire. Faced with environmental collapse and military pressure, the Nazca social order probably fractured. The shared faith that had motivated the creation of the lines for generations may have broken down, the people losing belief that their giant prayers could still bring rain. This combination of factors likely scattered the population and ended the ritual tradition forever. This lack of a single, neat answer is not a failure of archaeology, it is the very heart of the line's power. Their mystery is a mirror. We look at them and see what we need to see: a celestial calendar, a prayer for water, a message to the gods, or even a landing strip for ancient visitors. The fact that they resist a final, definitive explanation is what keeps us coming back century after century, forever drawn to the silent question mark etched across the desert floor. You cannot actually see the Nazca Lines from space with the naked eye. This is a myth that sounds impressive but simply is not true. The lines are vast, but the individual figures and trenches are far too narrow to be resolved by an unaided human eye from orbit. Astronauts in the International Space Station look down upon Earth and see the glow of cities, the vast colors of deserts, and the deep blue of oceans, but they cannot pick out the hummingbird or the spider. The lines are best viewed from an aircraft at a few thousand feet, the same perspective that revealed them to pilots a century ago. This fact actually makes their story more compelling, not less. The Nazca did not need an impossible cosmic perspective to create their art. They relied on earthly ingenuity and a profound belief in their purpose. The alien theory, while a fun piece of science fiction, crumbles under the weight of real-world evidence. The idea that the lines were runways for alien spacecraft ignores the fundamental reality of the desert floor. It is not a solid, paved surface, but a soft, unstable layer of sand and pebbles. Any heavy craft attempting to land would sink or be torn apart. Furthermore, many of these so-called runways stretch across hills and valleys, making them completely impractical for any kind of vehicle. This theory also does a great disservice to the Nazca people themselves. It suggests they were incapable of such achievements without outside help, ignoring the clear evidence of their sophisticated culture. We know they built complex aqueducts, wove intricate textiles, and created beautiful pottery. The construction of the lines required no alien technology, only simple tools, coordinated labor, and a powerful, shared motivation rooted in their environment and beliefs. The wonder is not that aliens might have done it, but that humans did. So how did they achieve such precision? The methods were elegant in their simplicity. For the long, straight lines, teams of workers would set a series of sighting poles in a straight line across the desert. By carefully aligning their view from the first pole to the last, they could guide the clearing of stones to form a path that remained perfectly straight for miles, a technique of basic surveying that is still used today. For the complex animal figures, they likely started with a small-scale model. Using a central axis line and a system of stakes and ropes, they could plot key points of the design, essentially connecting the dots on a colossal scale. This was not a mystical process, but one of practical geometry and immense patience. The motivation was equally grounded. In a world where water meant life and drought meant death, these people were not building for visitors from other stars. They were building for the mountain gods they believed controlled the rains, for the celestial bodies that marked the seasons, and for the spirits of the animals that symbolized fertility and survival. The lines were a desperate, hopeful, and monumental conversation with the forces that held their fate in the balance. While speculation about ancient astronauts is entertaining, the truth is a far more human and inspiring story of a civilization using every resource it had to speak to its gods. The next chapter of the Nazca mystery is already being written, not with brooms and ladders, but with laser pulses and radio waves. The future of research here lies in technologies that see through the Earth itself. Light detection and ranging, known as LiDAR, is set to revolutionize our understanding. Mounted on drones or aircraft, LiDAR scanners fire millions of laser beams at the ground, digitally stripping away surface vegetation and features to create a high-resolution, three-dimensional map of the bare Earth. This technology could reveal geoglyphs so eroded they are completely invisible to the human eye, or uncover an entirely new layer of smaller, more intricate figures hidden in the rocky foothills. Imagine finding the delicate footprint of an entire ceremonial complex, its foundations lying just beneath the stones we walk on. Alongside LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar offers a different kind of X-ray vision. By sending radar pulses into the soil and measuring the echoes, this tool can detect buried walls, cavities, or ancient pathways without ever breaking the ground. It might locate the subterranean chambers where priests prepared for rituals, or trace the hidden network of ceremonial paths connecting the lines to distant settlements. These are not tools of mere discovery, they are instruments of preservation, allowing us to map the entire sacred landscape without disturbing a single stone. But technology alone cannot solve a 2,000-year-old puzzle. The real breakthrough will come from a fusion of sciences where archaeologists no longer work in isolation. Interdisciplinary studies are weaving together threads from many fields to create a richer tapestry of Nazca life. Climatologists are analyzing ice cores from nearby Andean glaciers, reading the history of droughts and floods that plagued the civilization. By cross-referencing these climate timelines with the construction dates of different geoglyphs, we could see if the creation of a massive spider figure coincided with a generation of devastating water scarcity. Anthropologists are re-examining the cultural connections between the Nazca and their Paracas ancestors, and their wary successors, looking for shifts in spiritual belief that might explain why certain animal figures were abandoned and new ones were drawn. Botanists and zoologists can identify microscopic pollen and animal remains preserved in the ancient soil of the ceremonial platforms, revealing what specific offerings were left for the gods. Was it maize for a bountiful harvest or coca leaves to induce a shamanic trance? This collaborative approach promises a more holistic answer, moving beyond a single explanation. The lines were likely not just a calendar or just water prayers or just ritual pathways. They were all these things at once, a complex system of belief and survival that evolved with the climate and the culture. The ultimate goal is to understand the Nazca mind, to comprehend how they perceived their place in a cosmos where a mountain was a god and a line on the ground was a bridge to the divine. The silent desert is about to speak with a chorus of scientific voices, and the story it tells will be far more wondrous than any single theory could ever hold. These desert giants have taken us on a journey from the heavens to the earth and deep into the human spirit. We have walked with the ancient Nazca, a people of profound sophistication who mastered a brutal landscape with aqueducts and art. We have traced their long, straight lines, debated their purpose as celestial calendars and sacred pathways, and stood in awe of their colossal animal prayers etched for the gods. We have sifted through the wilder theories of ancient astronauts and sonic levitation, only to find that the truth is far more compelling, a story of human faith, communal effort, and a desperate, beautiful dialogue with the forces of nature. The Nazca Lines resist any single, simple explanation, and that is their greatest power. They are not a puzzle to be solved, but a monument to be contemplated. They stand as a timeless testament to human ingenuity and to that deep, universal yearning to communicate, to believe, and to leave a mark on the world that echoes for millennia. The conversation about these lines is far from over, and we would love to hear your voice in it. What is your favorite theory about the Nazca Lines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into history's greatest enigmas, subscribe for more explorations into the mysteries of our